Hi, my name is Glenna Mason. I'm a 4-H agent in Orangeburg and Calhoun County. Today we're in the 4-H kitchen. We're making loaf breads as a part of our Baking 101 series. Today we'll be making a corn blueberry loaf bread. Now I know what you're thinking, corn and blueberries, but it's not corn, it's cornmeal. So let's get started. I've got here in my bowl 2 cups of regular all-purpose flour, and I've measured those using the proper measuring method. I'm going to add to that 1 cup of yellow cornmeal. I'm going to add to that 3/4 of a cup. Do you know what 3/4 of a cup is? 3/4 of a cup is when you measure a half and a fourth, or you could measure 1/4 3 times. So I'm going to pour my sugar in there. Okay, right, all of our dry ingredients go into one bowl. I'm going to need baking powder, so I'm going to add 1 tablespoon of baking powder. To that, I'm going to add my half a teaspoon of baking soda. And I'm going to add 1 teaspoon of salt. Now you may be thinking, what is salt doing in a loaf bread? But it just takes a little bit of salt, 1 teaspoon. I'm going to level it off right here into my salt container. Alright, so here I've got all of my dry ingredients. All of my dry ingredients are my flour, my cornmeal, my sugar, my baking powder, my salt, and my baking soda. I'm just going to take a whisk and stir all of that up just to make sure all that gets mixed up and I'm not getting my baking powder and my baking soda all at one time. Okay, I'm going to take my next ingredients, which will be wet. So 1 bowl has our dry ingredients, 1 bowl has our wet ingredients. Make sure when you crack your eggs, you're going to need 2 eggs. You're going to take a small bowl to make sure that you crack or don't have any shells into it. So I'm going to whack it with a knife. I'm going to get 1 egg in there. That looks good. I'm going to dump it in my bowl. My second egg. If you've never cracked an egg before, that's an easy method, so you're not scared. I'm going to put it in my bowl. Check that I don't have any shells and put it in here. All right, now we're going to have our milk. This calls for buttermilk. I'm not a real big buttermilk drinker, so in my house, I make my own buttermilk when I use it in recipes. It calls for a cup of buttermilk. So instead, I've taken 1 tablespoon of lemon juice, poured it into my measuring cup, then I filled up with the rest up to 1 cup with milk, and I'll let it sit for 5 minutes. Now, I wouldn't want to drink this, but in our recipe, it will work just like buttermilk. All right, so that's going to be a wet ingredient I add to that. So my eggs, and then I've got 1/3 cup of oil. So just like I whisk all of those things together, I'm going to make sure that I whisk all my liquid ingredients or all my wet ingredients together. So when you're making a loaf bread, this is called a muffin method of mixing. Even though we're not making muffins, this is our muffin method where you have 1 bowl is dry ingredients and the other bowl is wet ingredients. Now I want to take a rubber scraper and I'm just going to make a well in the center of this. It's just a hole in the center of this. Okay, so I'm going to take my wet ingredients, pour them into my dry ingredients. Okay, and then I just stir until it's mixed. I don't need a mixer. I'm just going to stir it around until it's all moistened. Making that well in there helps make sure that your liquid gets all mixed in. I just want to stir it till I don't see any more of my dry ingredients and everything is moistened. There should probably be some lumps in there. You can still see I have some white flour that I see, so I'm going to keep stirring that around until I don't see any of my white or dry ingredients together. Now, this calls for blueberries. So I've taken 1 cup of blueberries. I'm going to pour those in my bowl. And what I like to do so that my blueberries don't sink to the bottom, I'm going to put about a tablespoon of flour in there, and I'm just going to stir these up so that it kind of gives a light coating to my blueberries and they don't end up at the bottom of my pan. So I'm just going to kind of toss those around. The blueberries are kind of wet and this kind of coats them. Now I want to add these to my bowl here, and I don't want to stir them, so I don't want to disturb and make my batter blue, so I'm just going to fold. Folding is an over and over motion. So I'm just going to scrape around the bowl, turn it over. Scrape around the bowl and turn it over. And keep doing that until you see all your blueberries are mixed up. Make sure you scrape to the bottom of the bowl. I still see some of my dry ingredients down in there, so I need to stir a little bit more. But try not to make it be a very heavy hand, so again that your batter doesn't turn blue. If your batter turns blue, then we know that you've overmixed it. I'm going to scrape to the bottom of this bowl and make sure that I got all my dry ingredients in here. So again, I don't need a mixer. Quick breads are made from a chemical leavening agent, and we put 2 of those in. We put our baking powder and our baking soda in, so we don't have to have time to let it rest. And that's what I like about quick breads, is that we're going to make sure that we have a quick loaf. We don't have to wait on it to rise. Okay, I didn't do a very good job of mixing. So just slowly get all that. Still see a little bit of white flour mixed in. All right, we've got our baking pans. Our baking pans for this recipe calls for an 8 by 4 by 2. So when you're choosing your baking pans, make sure that you choose the right size. These are going to be a little bit smaller loaf. If you put it in a regular pan, oh, you know what? I forgot to add my vanilla. If you forget to add your vanilla, then just go right ahead and add your vanilla. Even teachers make mistakes. That's why I set out all my ingredients. So I made sure I used them all, but I saw my vanilla. All right, we'll give that a quick stir to get our vanilla mixed in. So see how forgiving quick breads are. Even if you make a mistake, you can correct it. That's why you shouldn't be afraid of cooking. All right, I've got my baking pans. This makes 2 loaves, so I'm going to split up my baking pans into these 2 pans. Try to do it a little evenly. One is a little bit bigger than the other, but they're almost the same size. Actually, you could choose a larger loaf pan or the mini loaf pans, and you could make this. Make sure you could use it as a gift. All right, so they're all ready to bake in the oven. I've got my oven already preheated at 375. Hi, here we are. They've finished. They have baked for about 25 minutes. Our recipe calls for 25 to 30 minutes. You always want to make sure you set for the less amount of time. So I set it for 25 minutes. I checked it, and it should be lightly browned. There's a dome that forms on it. You'll see it rise. And a loaf bread traditionally has a crack down the middle. So you see that crack. I put them on a rack. I've let them rest for 5 minutes in the pan, but don't leave them in the pan because the moisture will make them become soggy. So I'm going to turn them out on this cake pan. If you spray the pan, you're going to have a nice loaf bread. There we go. This one is a little bit smaller loaf, but about the same size. So you see they make for a small loaf. And there you have our blueberry corn loaf. Thanks. See you again.